Yeah. No. So
where is Harold?
it's a good question. I haven't heard. Let me see if I have an email, but I don't think so. So a couple of things on, if you want, what kind of while we're waiting,
Yeah.
I can throw out there. There's two interesting developments. So one of the great sort of managers, facilitators who had been a part of what's going on at CoronaWhy, and she had to step back, but is still very keen on what we're doing, and is especially fascinated by that piece of bringing people together and having even the tasks that are come up with be emergent.
Yeah.
She and I are going to be working on writing a paper and then a blog series on
what kind of series?
Like a blog series online.
Okay, yeah.
But also putting together a more academic paper, looking at the kind of structure that CoronaWhy is and how the learnings that we can have of how something like that works can apply to other organizations, as well as, I mean, one of the key hypotheses that I want to vigorously explore is that I feel like there a lot of the tools and techniques that we're using at CoronaWhy, they're things that a lot of existing organizations adopt to make things more efficient, but that I would argue what they actually do is enable these fundamentally new types of organization and of organizational work to exist, so that that sort of swarm process and such are feeding in a new way. So I think those are interesting to write about. On the practice side, it looks like there may be an opportunity to take the methodology we're using at CoronaWhy and apply it in a different field. So at the university where I'm working, we might look at how we could do something similar, but with the mission being around virtual reality use in education.
Yeah.
Especially looking at virtual environments that allow students who don't have access to the specialized spaces and specialized equipment that they otherwise would. And so that starts out from a self-isolating point of view, but in terms of overall social justice and equitability, it has a lot of implications as well. And so that may give us a little bit of stereoscopic vision as to how this kind of organizational venture works, because it'll be a very different set of tasks, very different set of people who get involved, but I'm going to see whether a similar process works well. And if it does, then we can kind of set up a global network of people working on that. Then it makes it much easier for a third one to then come up around whatever the appropriate topic is.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know that Peter Mary was also working on applying VR in educational process to really to personalize based on talent sets and challenges.
Okay.
Personalized learning environment.
Yes.
So it's virtualization with AR and such. So that's a good blend in of tech for good, so to speak. Yeah, that would be great. You know, it relates to the system change in the education system, making virtual what can be made virtual with benefits, and this personalization, and more easily getting a multi-perspective, a multidisciplinary approach to study pathways as well, where the challenges are such complex and dealing with such diverse of issues and stakes and such, that more and more you get to this domain or field of transdisciplinarity. Well, that can be indeed be yes, it is fantastic. Yeah, well, I was in parallel. Indeed, we must converge at some stage. Working on a paper.
Hello, Daniel.
Hey, welcome.
There he is.
Hi,
oh.
Wout-Jan.
Hey, Harold.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I like the background.
Okay.
It's an halo.
So that you cannot forget me. Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's it. That's it right now. Share. Good.
Okay.
Okay, end of our conversation, Daniel. We'll proceed on that.
Well, it's a perfect segue into this. We were just talking about some of
Good.
the general approaches towards using the kind of processes we're doing at CoronaWhy, but looking at that larger scale of general global issues, and how do you actually build teams of people together in sort of a swarm format to work on some of the global issues that can be worked on globally and locally.
Yeah, I took it because what surely will be applied in a way, and it was really applied in various fields. When you talk about meshing various stakes, streams, tasks, interests, domains, etc. The mesh working as that something that came out of Arlington and Don Beck. So the mesh working approach, that I think it would be good to incorporate that as well, or to look at that as well, if you cooperate with her on the learning, developing an approach from that point of view of honoring, let's say, the social cultural values and aspects of the process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we match that with Harold?
Yeah. Hello.
I mean, I'm fascinated to hear more about kind of your goals and process around the dashboard.
Okay.
I think it's the perfect way for a lot of that stuff to kind of work. So, anyways, yeah.
All right. I can tell you more about that. Can you first, shall we do a short introduction?
Let's do.
Who you are, and especially what I'm curious about is, what are you looking for? How can we help?
Yeah. So I'm one of the team over at CoronaWhy, which is a group of several hundred people internationally working on data analysis, artificial intelligence, and visualization approaches to COVID data, with the goal to help decision makers in policy and in medicine do their work, as well as researchers. So the first key tool that we already released an early version of, but are working further on, are things to allow like a literature review proxy to happen more efficiently. And we're then working on a discovery engine so that people are able to, in a much more fine-grained way than a search engine like Google would provide, be able to find the articles that are most relevant to what they're working on. We're working on other pieces as well, but because of the nature of what we're doing is all very self-organizing. We bring people in, we have existing teams that function, but what we're trying to do is allow, as people stream in, for them to identify, here's the areas that we want to be working on, and then come up with and formalize tasks and projects around those. Having an overall compass to what needs to be done and the places where this data approach to the COVID response is suitable is great. And so that was one of the places where I was really excited by your dashboard as a way to very easily visualize, and especially since it can be data driven, visualize what the needs are that are out there, so that we can both see what we can do, but also so we can plug in and see what are the other organizations that are out there that are working on things, and how do they all sort of fit into that map.
Clear, and that is exactly what made me come to the point of we need some kind of dashboard, some kind of cockpit, because there is an overload of information to consumers, to scientists, and it's because of the virus is rather new to people. You need to have some overview of the information. So it took me a couple of weeks to develop something for myself and to build that up. And well, this is what you see in my background is what I came up with. And I tried to wrote an article about it.
Yes, I read the article.
Yeah, all right, cool. With the backgrounds, including all the references, so that people could could find out for themselves how the information is gathered together. And I'm very happy about it that CoronaWhy is interested. I read some more about on the website of what you folks are doing. And I can imagine, I wrote something about that. There are 10 different services within CoronaWhy. You have already 5 dashboards. I checked one of the dashboards, and that makes it understandable that besides that you want to be a sort of Google, that doctors and people who are interested can find their information, you also want to have something that you can present so that it's easy to find what you're looking for.
That's right.
I also think that people are searching for information, but they don't know exactly how to search and where to search, and even people that are not knowing what they're searching. But so that is why I think it's important to have some kind of cockpit or dashboard.
No, I agree. And I mean, one of the things that we're in early stages around, but seems like it's also useful, is just in terms of global knowledge sharing around what's going on, is that having something like a dashboard like this, as you say, it helps people see what are the unknown unknowns. You may have a given region that understands that they need to develop their practices and policies and protocols around X, Y, and Z, but that they haven't even thought about the fact that A, B, and C are things that
right.
Looking at as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So originally, I had no plans to make this commercial or to do anything more about it, other than I'm curious how the figures look like within a week or a month, see how that develops. So I'm planning to write new articles about trends and to let people know where we are now and where we are heading to, etc. And what also is important, and that is why I'm enthusiastic about CoronaWhy, I discovered that especially in my cockpit, the long-term criteria are very important also. Yeah. Because that is more about the cause. Why do we have a virus anyway? And what can we do to prevent such viruses? So that is why it's important that although countries may think the worst is over, right. They still have to learn yes. what has happened, because it can happen again and again, and maybe far worse. Yeah.
One of the uses that I see being incredibly powerful of something like your dashboard is being able to, to be able to sort of press play and fast forward on it, and be able to have people look at over the course of, like, I'm picturing, an XY graph with your dashboard as the circle which you can move to sort of scry into what was going on at a given point, and to be able to see and to then tag in, like, when all of a sudden, say, these 3 survival characteristics started to become under control, what were the specific initiatives that were going on that were making that happen, and being able to use that map of what has happened to look at general pandemic response, and look at, not only for 2nd and 3rd wave of COVID-19, but the next time something happens, to have a better map for where are we going to fall down as a species, and what are the things that have been effective this time around in dealing with things.
Yeah, that would be great if you can navigate through the cockpit in time or in different aspects, etc. Yeah, that would be very great. And I'm sure that there are data tools, navigation tools available to support that.
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly the kind of a thing that if we have some folks who get excited about that at CoronaWhy in terms of data visualization, we have some really gifted folks at trying to make some of that kind of thing.
Okay.
And yeah, you currently have it. Do you have a version that is sort of live updating? Like, do you push something that allows it to create the graphs that you have within the dashboard? Or is that something that currently you're sort of manually reviewing the data and then giving it what its assignment would be?
Now the presentation you see, I did that in PowerPoint. So that is not yet connected to the Excel. The Excel database is the basis of all the calculations. So all the indexes, in fact, you have 10 indexes that are calculated automatically. But to create this PowerPoint figure, you have to create that manually. And of course, what you want is that it's connected and automatically updated.
Personally, I'd be interested in exploring that a little if you're interested. So if you had sort of a Google Doc version of those spreadsheets, I'd be happy to look at taking something like an observable notebook and trying to craft it so that it was, probably via PHP or something, pulling out the data from the spreadsheets and just creating it. And it would be interesting to talk about, what would be, if it was not just an infographic, but if it was actually a navigational tool, how you would envision that being used would be interesting to discuss.
You mean how as a scientist or a user to navigate?
That's right. So for example, you have under there, like if I'm just picturing it in my mind, looking at the cockpit that you have behind you, I could look at investing and see where the bar for the Netherlands is. It would be possible to click on that and have it then take you to a more detailed presentation of the data that goes into for the Netherlands, etc.
Yeah. And in my view, I think what you want then is when you click on investing, you may see a world map, so that you can go to your country or your region, but probably you want to know more about the figures, what the figures are behind the figures. And currently investing is based on the medical expenditures in a country per capita. So there's a world behind that figure, because medical expenditures are far more than only what is spent on the virus and corona. And so I think it's important if you zoom into the cockpit that you see more about regions and cities and countries, but also more about what kind of expenditures were there. And the third possible navigation when you're zooming in is, of course, time. You want to know how was it last year? Where are we now? What is the trend, etc. Yeah.
I could also see it being useful taking essentially trying to connect in with. So this is sort of a dual use thing. It would be useful to connect in with subject matter experts for each of those different areas to see what refinements can be made in terms of how those metrics are defined. But I can also see on the flip side, that same process, the cockpit functions in a great way for trying to get those unifying conversations going and getting those interdisciplinary conversations going with people globally around how we look at these things and how we measure them, which of course then having that discussion helps create a foundation for having the other actual active conversations about, okay, so now that we are mapping that and discussing it, what do we do about it? And
exactly.
That's great.
I even can imagine that it connects people. So people who know a lot about health expenditures but also know a lot about how to transform economies. So it's interesting to see what are the people who have the knowledge and wants to share knowledge. So it can be also a great powerful tool to find the right people to share your knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe also as an input tool, if you say, okay, I have here a piece of research that is recently published, and I want to add that into the cockpit, that you go to a workflow with several reviews by people like Wikipedia, that it's enriched information, to enrich the information.
Yeah.
That could also be possible.
No, that's very interesting to explore.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, how can we help you on this point? From this point?
So if you're interested, it seems like a good starting place would be if you were open to trying to have, again, whether it's a Google Doc or some other location that makes it easy for us to pull information to try to dynamically generate the cockpit, obviously with all credit to you for the cockpit's design and the information that's getting piped into there. My hunch is that this may, because of how CoronaWhy works, it sort of is gathering people by artifact. If we can make a compelling artifact out of the cockpit, that's something that we can then use to demonstrate to more people the importance of a tool like this. And that will then allow us to then see if we can pull more members and more interest into designing that more refined, more detailed interface that this could be sort of the home interface for.
Yeah.
And everything we're doing is all based on we're saying everything. So anything that we're building, we're just looking for how do we have maximum impact through it. And so we could talk more about like kind of what your take on that is, or the approach that you're looking at. But that's something that certainly appeals as a possibility for something like that.
Yeah. And I'm a bit uncertain what you're looking for at this point. I have this Excel with all the data, and what do you like to develop from this point?
Right. So if that data, I mean, ideally, what I would see wanting to as a first step of development would be a Google spreadsheet that has the data. Ideally, something that helps us so that data can be pumped in regularly and in an automated fashion from those data sources that are leading to those metrics. And then I would then develop a script which creates an automated version of something. It probably wouldn't start out as aesthetically pleasing, but essentially a dashboard or a cockpit like the one that you have there. And then once that piece is going, probably then to discuss with you to see, okay, so what would be the next steps in terms of interface that you would envision moving.
Yeah, right.
Or correlation of data.
That's right. Yeah.
Because of course I'm listening. It's a good practice. I can imagine if a first step is an automatic creation dynamically of this cockpit annex dashboard based on Harold's data and CoronaWhy data, that you kind of parallel to that might be able to see if other data that is not yet included or from CoronaWhy into the dashboard or correlated to what is presented in the dashboard or the cockpit might be of influence significantly on, let's say, the bars that are represented, So that might be a parallel step in that first step to see if there are, the unknown known. If there are correlations that might be, because I was about 2 weeks ago. I was diving into a piece of work, by the way, from a Dutchman who did thorough analysis and came up with some models, about 8 or 10 different models about different social, cultural, political setups that have an influence on policy making, on, let's say, the degree of insurances that are present in a country. You know, for instance, the gap between citizen and government, and that's correlated to the type of democracy. And that's also tying into how do we handle, how do we contain, how do we invest and such. If you have these models and data on it, actual data on various geographies and nations, then you can take that into account as well in the analysis, and you maybe come up with some additions or enhancements on this cockpit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like that. One of the things that, like, you know, a sort of vision for it for me would be to also have each of those sort of substratum layers be something that can continue growing and is useful in its own right. So that if you keep on adding new data sets, keep adding new ways of turning those into useful models, and then ways of turning those into visualizations, which can feed into a cockpit like this, it makes it very easy to then have sort of a Lego model for that, so that when you're looking instead at climate change, or you're looking instead at education, or you're looking at a different piece, some of those pieces you pull off, you put on other pieces, and you can then build concrete models, which you can then test to see whether they actually are tracking to reality well or not.
So that means that you would like to see, you like to know of applications of the insights that can be taken from the cockpit. How is it applied in real world? Get and organize a feedback application.
Yes.
So what of the model fits reality, so to speak. And secondly, organizing learning and development, which is poorly done in most ways in organizations. If you have presented a certain collection of people and stakeholders, if you provide with these insights at a certain point of time about how to deal with containment of second wave, considering this and that, later on you come up with new insights, new correlations that leads to, let's say, a betterment, adjustment of this insight, this intelligence, this. You should be able to push that intelligence, new insights, to the people that are working on the model. That is why we are not so adaptive in this world, because we still using models from, let's say, half a century ago. So,
that's right. And one of my colleagues, Lee Sembeluk, what he works with is training sports teams, elite sports teams, in how to work more and efficiently. And what he talks a lot about is that piece of OODA loops, you know, observing, orienting, deciding, acting. And one of the things that I'm excited about the potential for something like this dashboard is it provides a way to increase the pace and the accuracy of that loop happening when it comes to individual, regional, and global response to things like pandemic, so that we become much more effective and rather than slowly waking up to the fact we have to do something, kind of staggering around and grabbing what information happens to be at hand, pushing it together and hoping that it tells us something, being able to have a blueprint already in place for, you know, when this kind of a thing happens, you know, Black Swan event X, here's the map that we can overlay on top of that. Here's how we can quickly consolidate the information together. And then here's how we can turn that into a responsive feedback loop that helps us, respond.
Yeah. And to know of the key experts that are related to that concern, so to speak. It's not only data, it's just an abstraction of reality. You need to know the people with their human intelligence as well, that could guide that process and also facilitate learning and reflection and improvement. So circular way of, so also relating to create relationships to experts involved, you know.
Yeah. And both experts and organizations, you know, when I mentioned at one point, one of the other utilities that I see for the dashboard being functioning as a way to try to map out some of the people and organizations that are involved. So, you know, you can take something like this and look at policy centers, the World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control, all manner of different organizations, CoronaWhy, co-vengers, all of the different people who are out there working in a different domain. And as you put together sort of the looking at the cockpit there, sort of the Lego bricks of what the elements of the cockpit you're putting together are, that gives you not only the information, but it would automatically give you that mapping as well. If you were using this as a way to map the organizations and individuals, it would be amazing how quickly you could potentially then put together an effective map of who to get in touch with and what sort of liaising should be happening between organizations.
Yeah, yeah.
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 Okay. If we move one step further, it would be helpful if you can send me an email with what the next step and what you exactly need.
That's great.
Then I can think about how to help you on that.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, so I'll send at the end of day a couple of notes of what we talked about, and then sort of like, here's the next, what I would see as the clear next steps for us to take, and we can then refine together what the sort of the roadmap would be of where we might take.
Yeah, that sounds
Wonderful.
Very good for me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, and again,
okay.
I love the work you're doing there.
It's an honor to talk to you, Daniel, and thank you, Wout-Jan, for connecting.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to our next call.
Definitely. Yeah, Wout-Jan, always, whenever you say, you should probably talk to so-and-so, or check out this thing that this person is doing, I try to pay close attention because you're very plugged into how those patterns are moving and who's working on which pieces. So thank you for making that connection.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
As one.
See you.
We'll move on. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you.
Daniel.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.